It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. You can find out more about me. Follow me on X if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. I'm always posting stuff all the time and would appreciate a follow, and I'll follow you back. You can also find out more about me on Facebook, both, again, all the socials at Dan Mandis Show. And I got to tell you that listening to this interview, Mark Halprin, if you don't know who he is, he's a guy who's done a lot of sports commentary, but he's segued into politics and segued very nicely, as a matter of fact. And so he was on with Tucker Carlson. What I like about Mark Halprin is that, and I tend to gravitate towards people when I listen to podcasts and talk show hosts and so forth, because I listen to a lot of everything. I like the ones, and I gravitate towards the ones that really call it like they see it. And, you know, they're not afraid to criticize Donald Trump. They're not afraid to criticize Kamala Harris, and they're willing to call BS. And that's one of the reasons why I also like Tucker Carlson. And so Tucker has Mark Halprin on, and they're talking about, you know, because the big news this week is Kamala Harris, and she's going on with Charlemagne, and she's out there trying to, you know, get as many black voters as she can. You got Barack Obama going out as well and, you know, chastising black men, saying that they're sexist and misogynist if they don't support Kamala Harris. I mean, it's the whole thing. It's what we've been talking to this week. So this is Tucker Carlson and Mark Halprin, and it echoes what I said in the previous hour. One of the things that I said in the previous hour was that I was listening to a podcast, and it was sort of like just very quickly, I listened to about, I don't know, a minute of the podcast, and I don't even know what podcast it was. But it was a couple of black guys, and they were talking about how Kamala Harris just was not appealing to them. They didn't like the sound of her voice. They said that she sounded very Hillary Clinton-like. And they thought that this election was going to and felt a lot like Hillary Clinton's campaign. And their prediction was that's how this campaign was going to end, with Donald Trump in the White House for a second term and people screaming that America is full of fascists and racists. But I want to play for you what Mark Halprin has to say. And because he kind of had the same experience that I just talked about, where he was speaking to some men who are black, and they're not supporters of Kamala Harris.
If the anecdotal is even close to true, Trump will break the record among support from black men. I mean, he'll smash it if the anecdotal is close to true. It's all over social media. It's all over my platform. It's all over every story I hear. And part of it, you know, I'll give you a couple of elements of this that I think is important. Part of it is Trump has always had appeal with kind of a macho, rich, pretty wife thing.
Yeah.
Has that. But it's also, you know, this example of biased coverage. The press says when Trump says some young black men identify with him and their parents because he's been persecuted, the press says that's racist. My experience is just true. They get the fact that the legal system comes after people unfairly. And if it can happen to Trump, it can happen to them. And it has happened to them and their family and their communities. And then lastly, the failure of liberals to make life in cities for poor kids better is also a massive scandal.
It is absolutely a massive scandal. And the thing that I don't understand, and I've got a little bit more from Mark Halprin, but the thing that I don't understand, I mean, I live in Tennessee, so I'm in Nashville. So to the west, we have Memphis. Memphis is like every year, if there is a list of the most dangerous cities, the most murderous cities, the whatever, Memphis is always at the top of the list. Memphis is like the blight of Tennessee. Yet what do? Every single election season, they vote for the Democrats. They vote for a Democrat mayor. They vote for a Democrat city council. They vote for Democrats. And we see the same pattern all across the country. And it drives me nuts. I was talking about Detroit the other day, about how Donald Trump said, remember this? I think it was about this time last night. Donald Trump talked about Detroit. And he said that if Kamala Harris is voted into the White House, then America will become Detroit an absolute mess. And everybody was freaking out. The left was saying, oh, my God, he wants the people of Michigan to vote for him. And he's blasting Detroit. And one of the things that I said was, well, yeah, the people that live in Detroit know it's a crap hole. I mean, a quick Google search will tell you that. Yet the people in Detroit will vote for Democrats time and time and time again. And so Mark Halprin is right. What I wish is that if, and I don't believe for a second that Donald Trump is going to far and away win the black vote. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that what is going to happen, and what Halprin is talking about, and the guy on, I forget what channel he's on, but Harry Enton, I think that's his name. I think he's either CNN or NBC or whatever it is. But he said the same thing, that Donald Trump could set the record for Republican presidents getting black support. Now, I have no doubt that Kamala Harris will get more black support than Donald Trump, but that's a big deal. I wish that would happen on the local level. I wish that at the local level, if you've got cities like Memphis or like Washington, D.C., or like Chicago and some of these other big cities where the cities are a mess, I would like to see more of these communities voting for Republicans. You know, when Donald Trump said, years ago, what have you got to lose? I mean, I would ask that same question for people that live in the communities that I just mentioned. I've been to Memphis, and it's not pretty. I don't get off the highway, matter of fact. And so it's always interesting because you have people that are like, well, our city's terrible, and, it's full of criminals, and murder is skyrocketing, and all of these other things. And it's like, well, you voted for, the Democrats. You voted for them. You voted for a Democrat city council. You voted for a Democrat, mayor. You voted for a Democrat police chief, no doubt. So I don't know what to tell you. It's all these people. I remember this story. All the people on the south side of Chicago, they were screaming about all of the illegal aliens. They were screaming about all of the migrants that were taking up all the resources on the south side of Chicago. And you know what I said on my morning show in Nashville, Tennessee? I shrugged my shoulders and I said, well, who'd you vote for? If you voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, well, then you voted for this. Because during the primary, during a debate, when they started talking about illegal immigration and allowing people into our country, every single one of those candidates, or just about every single one of those candidates, they all said, basically, that they favored illegal immigration. So it's hard to feel sorry for communities that voted for this. And so when Mark Halprin is talking to Tucker Carlson, and they're talking about this, and talking about how a lot of these folks that live in these communities, specifically black men who live in these communities, and now they're realizing that the Democrats have not helped them. Maybe they're finally seeing the light. I hope that they have. He goes on to talk about, and this is actually interesting, he goes on to talk about, Halprin does, about the fact that Republicans have failed to take advantage of the Democrat failures.
Another scandal is that the Republican Party hasn't done anything to capitalize on it and create competition to be mayors of these cities.
For sure.
But when Trump says, I'm for criminal justice reform and I'm for fixing schools and I'm for creating more economic opportunity, he did criminal justice reform. The other stuff, his record is spotty, but he's saying, as he said in 2016, when people mocked him, what do you have to lose? These young black men say the Democratic Party offers nothing to me. Trump might offer something to me, and he's done criminal justice reform. I think again, you could be the most partisan Democrat in the world. If you can defend the performance of the Democratic Party to helping young black men, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, I love what he had to say. Mark Halprin on Tucker Carlson's podcast. Because he's right. And you know what the problem that the Democrats have? This is what infuriates me. Well, one of many things that infuriate me is that if you criticize the performance of the Democrats in these cities, you are called a racist. Now, the great news is after, over 30 years of working in talk radio, being called a racist, well, if you haven't been called a racist yet as a talk show host, then you're doing something wrong. But just because they say it doesn't mean it's true. And so that's also part of that conversation. So I guess the question is there anything that Kamala Harris is going to be able to say, either to Charlemagne or to Brett Baier, that is going to turn the tide on the black vote? I don't think that she's going to be able to. I think that the majority of people, I would be, maybe we'll try this tomorrow night. Maybe I'll take some calls on whether or not you are one of the undecideds out there. It's hard for me to believe. Well, I'll do it right now. If you're undecided, I would love to have you call right now. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I'll be able to do it in greater length tomorrow night. But if you're one of those undecideds, I would love to know how you're undecided or why you're undecided or what more do you need to know or hear. And how long have you been paying attention if you're undecided? Because I think that both of these candidates, and certainly Donald Trump, has shown you all that you need to know about where he stands on literally everything. I think you have seen enough of Kamala Harris to know what she's made of, and it ain't much. It isn't much at all. And that's why she goes on, a show like Charlemagne, trying to get that black vote. And she's asked questions like this.
Yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist.
And she was asked about reparations.
And the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position.
All right, so let me just tell you that when somebody says that reparations need to be studied, that means that they're not really going to do anything about it. I mean, look at what happened in California, where they had Gavin Newsom has a study, he has a whole panel, a whole committee to study reparations. And the committee came back with some insane number that the black people of California should be getting. And it was such an insane number that even Gavin Newsom was like, never mind. But whenever a politician says, and please trust me, I am not for reparations. I think the whole conversation is silly. But that being said, when any politician says, oh, yeah, it needs to be studied. Well, basically what that means is she's kicking that conversation down the road. That's what that means.
In terms of my immediate plan, I will tell you a few of the following. One, as it relates to the economy, which is a lot of what you have addressed. Look, I grew up in the middle class. My mother, worked hard, raised me and my sister.
Wow.
And by the time I was in high school, she was able to afford our first.
I think when Charlemagne, because one of the things that Charlemagne asked her is, do you ever say anything new? I mean, that she's had that whole, I grew up in a middle class community. She's been doing that for weeks now. And by the way, I don't think that it's connecting because people are not impressed with that. Because if you have to explain why you're relatable, you're not connecting. If you have to explain, like, the reason why people should like you and relate to you, then you're not connecting. And clearly people are not connecting, especially the black community apparently, are not connecting with Kamala Harris. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
If I were a screenwriter, I probably could not write up a better scenario for the 2024 harvest season.
USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says nature has written a pretty good script for this harvest season.
We have had wide open weather across the plains, the Midwest, the Northwest, just about every major production area except the hurricane zones in the Southeast that have been hit by multiple hurricanes. Most recently, Milton in Florida, as well as Helene across the Southeast. And that has thrown a wrench into some of the activities there. But for everybody else, it has been just the perfect harvest season to date.
Rippey says this week's freeze in some northern growing areas
should have very minimal impact on any of these crops.
47% of the corn crop's already in the bin. 64% of what's left is rated in good to excellent condition. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. 866-907-3339. I think this is really funny. And it's a short clip, so I can play it. This is Tim Walz talking about being a gun owner.
I think this is true. I think this might be the first Democratic ticket where both the president and the vice president are gun owners this time. So that's something. Yeah, it's something. And I say this to you because we're not going to allow them to make this about the Second Amendment. We certainly believe in the Second Amendment, and you're right to own this. But our first responsibility is to make sure we're protecting our children and our communities from gun violence.
You know, it is interesting. So, number one, he does look like Elmer Fudd. That's number one. He's dressed in, he's up on, it's totally pandering, but he's up at a podium. He's got a hat on, a green hat on, and some sort of a red flannel thing. And he looks ridiculous. But then the assertion that he and Kamala Harris are the only Democrat ticket to have ever both been gun owners, really? Is that where you want to go with this? Because I think that's a stretch. But what's also a stretch is when he says our first priority has to be protecting, I think he said, kids in schools. Well, then my question to him would be, if you want to protect kids in schools, well, then where are you with armed security guards in schools? Tim? Where are you with armed security resource officers, Tim? Where are you with arming teachers, Tim? I mean, these are all, and just so you know, these are all the things that I've been saying for years. Let the teachers that want to be armed be armed. Armed security guards or SROs. Something that is really important. Fortify the schools. Also things that you need to do. I mean, listen, I want to protect the kids. Absolutely, I want to protect the kids. But there has to be a discussion as to how we protect the kids. Oh, and by the way, if you're really concerned with protecting the kids, that's really good. If you want to talk about, violence in the cities, that's great too. You might want to work on your soft on crime policies because that's also a big part of the conversation.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, and you can find me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show on both X and Facebook. A guy sent me a note on Facebook. So apparently he's listening, and I don't know where he is from, but he sounds like, as I like to affectionately refer to, as a hate listener, and that's fine. Morning, Dan. I've been listening to you on Red Eye Radio, and I suppose you are aware of Donald Trump's rally in Prescott, Arizona, where he referred to Arizonans as Arizonians. So apparently Trump shanked the intro when it came out, and so I went looking for it because, I want to know what this guy's talking about, because basically he's calling me out for not calling out Donald Trump and his, as Ron says, his clear mental decline. And so as the oldest candidate at 78. All right, so this is what I found of Donald Trump. Because remember, Ronald says, and again, he sent me a message on Facebook. I guess this is Messenger, where he says that this is obviously indicative of Donald Trump's cognitive decline as the oldest candidate in this race at 78.
Well, thank you very much. And a very big hello, Arizona. We love you, Arizona.
Is that what you're talking about, dude? Because it sounds to me like this is Prescott, Arizona. This was October 13th, and this is the intro.
Hello, Arizona. We love you, Arizona.
So unless there's something I'm missing, and maybe I am, I asked him for an audio link, but it doesn't sound to me like he shanked anything at all. But he says, just wondering why Trump seems to get special treatment with the many gaffes that he gives now that he is the oldest candidate at 78 and is obviously showing his cognitive abilities is not up to the job of president. Is that true? Does Donald Trump have a lot of gaffes? I mean, listen, I'm 56, and just ask my Nashville audience, I gaff a lot. I have a lot of gaffes. But it doesn't mean that I've got cognitive decline. And I would also say this to Ronald. This was a speech, Donald Trump, this was a speech that was almost 2 hours long. And he hit it out of the park. And this was probably a speech at the end of the day where he's given many interviews and he's done many appearances. And every once in a while, you're going to gaff. But if you're going to sit here to try to tell me, and I'm being fair, if you're going to tell me that, I'm going to air quote this, that gaffe by Donald Trump is proof of cognitive decline, are you really going to try to compare that to Joe Biden? Because Joe Biden, there were days when it was obviously Joe Biden had no idea where he was. There were days when he was stumbling and slurring and just not making any sense. And that would go on for an entire press conference. So are you really, Ronald, is that what you're really trying to say? That Donald Trump is as bad as Joe Biden? Because if you just look at, and earlier in the program, I played audio from Donald Trump. He was doing an interview with, who was it? Was it Bloomberg? I think Bloomberg, I think. And he was spot on. He was defending his policies. He was talking about his policies, and he was keeping up. So I think if you're trying to, hold me accountable, okay. He says, if Biden or Kamala had done these things, all hell would be raised by Republicans. No, not by me. I will tell you, not by me. Now, I will talk about Kamala and, sort of the word salads that she does. and a guy who occasionally will word salad himself, I know it when I see it. I know it when I hear it. But I'm not running to be president of the United States. And so if Kamala makes, if she gaffes a word or whatever, I don't, that's not a big deal to me. I mean, people do make mistakes. But when she word salads and when she speaks in nothing but platitudes and when she openly lies about Donald Trump and his policies, yeah, you know what? I do raise holy hell. Because she won't necessarily defend her policies. All she'll do is criticize ours or Donald Trump's. Ronald says Trump also showed that he doesn't care about Americans by leaving hundreds of people stranded in the dark after his rally in Coachella, just like he did 4 years ago in Omaha in the freezing cold, in case you forgot. I don't know what happened in Coachella, and I don't know what happened in Omaha, but I will tell you that oftentimes when you've got thousands of people out at these rallies, these kind of things happen. And again, I don't know what you expect Trump to do if he's at an event and then he's got to get to another event in another state for, 2 hours later. He's got to leave. Now, I don't know what happened in Omaha, and I don't know what happened in Coachella. Ron also says, can you answer why Donald Trump should be held above the law after he instigated the insurrection, after he refused and still insisted he has won? So, is it a crime to believe that you won an election? That would be my question to Ronald. Is it a crime to believe that you won an election? Because if so, you might want to lock up Stacey Abrams out there in Georgia. If so, you might want to lock up Hillary Clinton. If so, you might want to lock up, I don't know, any number of Democrats who have been saying for years that Donald Trump either cheated, didn't win, or won because of the collusion with the Russians. So if you can point me to a law that Ronald, if you want to point me to a law that the former president broke, well, then we can talk. But as far as I know, this is the most persecuted man in America right now, and seems to me like they can't get anything to stick. And I think that's because the hysteria of people on the left, and by the way, Ronald, people on the right, that they have about Donald Trump, the reality is that he's not done anything wrong. The reality is that when January 6th was going on, he literally said, march peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. And the Democrats have thrown everything at Donald Trump. And nothing's sticking. And the reason why nothing is sticking is because he did nothing wrong. Why are Republicans, he ends with this. He says, why is it that the Republicans are so loyal to Donald Trump? Well, number one, I'm not loyal to Donald Trump. I'm loyal to his policies. I'm not loyal to a man. Well, I am. I'm loyal to God. But I'm not loyal to any mortal man. I love Donald Trump's policies. And the fact that he has been so persecuted, the man was almost assassinated. And yet he goes out there every single day. So to me, he shows a lot of mettle, that Donald Trump. He really does. Why are Republicans so loyal to him? I think it's because he possesses something. And when he came on the scene politically in 2016, and he announced that he was running for president, people realized that we finally have somebody who speaks like us and who understands what we're going through. And by the way, Ronald says, and for the record, I'm a registered Republican, been voting for 45 years. Well, Ronald, number one, thank you very much for listening to Red Eye Radio. I hope that I answered some of your questions. I mean, I can't, I could go and do a deep dive into everything that you mentioned. But, for me, I think that when Republicans, if they're hating Donald Trump and they say that they're either not going to vote or they're going to vote for Kamala Harris, well, then I would very much question your Republican card. I really would. Barbara is in Lebanon, Tennessee on Red Eye Radio. Barbara, thanks for calling in. Go ahead.
I get a bonus listening to you overnight. I was called for jury duty, and basically there's a screening process. And the judge is talking about our civic duty to do this. At any rate, he said if there are any persons here that are illegal, you are not eligible to serve on a jury. And he said, turn in your paperwork. And
you should have said, "Hola, Judge," and get out of it.
Yes, that would have been a good tactic, but I try to stay on the straight and narrow.
Very good, Barbara.
He said, no one will detain you, no law enforcement, no ICE. You may leave. Again, turn your paperwork over there, and you may leave. 5 persons get up and walk out. Well, I'm just puzzled. How did they get paperwork to serve in the first place, which tells me they're on some kind of roll otherwise?
Yes.
And when you were talking about Kamala not working, my opinion, humble as it is, she doesn't have to work very hard because there's going to be a lot of fraud.
Yeah. Well, and Barbara, thank you very much. Yeah. Well, go ahead. You got one last thought?
No, I just I like to believe in the process. I support Trump. I make no bones about it. But when I see something like that firsthand, it's like, holy mackerel. Anyway, that's my last thought.
well, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it. And I'll talk to you on WTN here in about 20 minutes. What I would say to that is, number one, I don't know if they get when they call people for jury duty, do they call people for jury duty? Do they get them from the driver's licenses? I should know this. I can't believe I don't know this. Anyway, bottom line is, number one, they should have checked these folks out. And I got to tell you, and Barbara, that's why Donald Trump is connecting with so many people. It is because of what you just said, because it's dismaying. It's like, how is it that people don't see what is going on? The Democrats and, Republicans like Dear Ronald that reached out to me and sent me a love letter that was full of hate. And it's just they don't have the same values. And in my opinion, if they're saying, well, if you're a Republican and you're going to sit this out because you don't like Donald Trump, well, okay, then by all means, again, in this very close election, I think that is, politically criminal. It really is. Because it is really close. And to quibble over things like, Trump and he messed up the intro to saying hello to Arizonans, to, he tried to overthrow an election and all this stuff when he clearly didn't. I think that it's really silly when you look at what is at stake in this election. Because what is at stake in this election is absolutely huge. You just heard Barbara talking about illegal immigration and how it really does. Everybody knows it's impacting every single state in our union. And it is infuriating when you see, what did I see? Guy called way earlier in the broadcast. It was actually a great call. Guy was talking about he had been to jail. And one of the things that he noted was that illegal aliens or migrants or whatever you want to call them, that's what he says. They get really clean, nice clothes. But if you're an American citizen, you sort of get the really ratty clothes. Now, I've thankfully, knock on wood, never been in prison, but I have no reason to believe that that he's telling a fib there. The American people see that illegal aliens or migrants are getting preferential treatment, and it angers people to no end. And that, I believe, is why there's so many people that will be voting for Donald Trump. Dan Mandis here on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye is the phone number. Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. I'll be back tomorrow night as well. You can always follow me on the socials. Wish that you would, actually. I'm on X at Dan Mandis Show.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.